Hello everyone and welcome to Creative Connections. My name is Frances and today we are welcoming Tandi Palmer Williams and Bianca Mulet from Patternmakers to talk about the much anticipated topic of what audiences want online. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the many countries throughout Australia and from where you are all joining us today. I acknowledge and pay my deep respects to the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, to their elders, both past, present, and emerging, and from where I am lucky enough to be joining you from today. Currently on screen, there's a blue PowerPoint slide with some text and some video boxes. You should be able to see our guest speaker and Auslan interpreter. I'm your host for today's session, and I'm a woman in my early 30s with fair skin, light brown hair, blue eyes, and wearing a colourful dress. In the background, you can see my jungle of an apartment with lots of plants, 2 chandeliers on the wall, and a picture behind me as well. Currently, so this webinar series has been developed to support you during this intense time of change. We acknowledge the different stages of coping, grieving, and adapting that you may all be at, and acknowledge that this is a roller coaster of change. Every day is different. We encourage you to be kind to yourself and to others, and to only feel you need to sign up to the sessions, these webinar sessions that you really need. We all know too well that screen fatigue is real. We've had some amazing speakers so far, and today is no different. We look forward to continue learning with you together and continue exploring how we adapt our leadership, our practices, and our digital capabilities. Please feel free to share these opportunities with anyone that you think will benefit from them. So just quickly before we get started, some housekeeping. Live captioning should now be available via Zoom and should have started automatically below on your screen. If it hasn't, you can just click the CC button on the bottom of your screen. If you prefer, you can also expand the screen to read the full transcript, which will appear on the right-hand side of the Zoom window. You can also change the size of the text in the subtitle settings. During this session, we invite you to engage with each other on the chat. Please feel free to share your ideas, links, examples, or anything that relates to today's topic. Similarly, if a question comes to mind during today's session, please feel free to send it through the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Ian will be managing your questions today, and we'll aim to get through as many as we can by the end of today's session. If at any point you need any technical support, please just raise your hand. Laura from our team will be here on hand to help you. You can do this by using the raise hand feature, which is also at the bottom of the tab on the bottom of your screen. And if all else fails, please just send us an email to leadershipprogram@australiacouncil.gov.au. And finally, a recording of today's webinar will be available after the session, and we'll send it to everyone who's registered for today's session. It'll also be available on the Australia Council website in the coming days. So currently on screen, you should now see a PowerPoint slide to introduce our guests. There is a text and 2 images, one of Tandi, a woman with short brown hair, and another image of her colleague Bianca, a woman with long, straight, dark brown hair. Tandi Palmer Williams is the Managing Director at Patternmakers, and Bianca is a research analyst also at Patternmakers. If you've not already checked it out, I highly encourage you to listen to their fab podcast, The Theory of Creativity, which delves into the depths of our cultural sector and interviews experts in research, business, technology, and policy. Today, Tandi and Bianca will explore what audiences want online, particularly in this rapidly growing and digitally adapted world. Tandi will ask us to reflect on what's changed, and we encourage you to interact and contribute through a live online poll, which we'll explain shortly, and should you wish to, and also by sharing any interesting online platforms or channels that you're currently using online. Please share these in the chat feature as we go. So Tandi and Bianca, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your thoughts and ideas. I'll now hand over to you, Tandi. I believe you've got some slides you'd like to share with us.
I do. Thank you, Frances. I'll just share my screen now. The trick is to share the right window at this time. Can you hear me okay? And can you see my slides headed what audiences want online? Great. So, Francis, if you can let me know if there's any technical difficulties, but otherwise I'll just plow on. So, hello everyone. Yes, as Francis said, I'm Tandi Palmer Williams and I'm head geek at the research agency Patternmakers. And we spend our days working with data to help good causes change the world. And a lot of our work is in the arts and culture sector. I'd like to add my acknowledgement of the traditional owners today, and in particular the Guringai people on whose lands I now enjoy safety and shelter at this time. And I want to particularly welcome any First Nations people joining us today. I think for the rest of us, I just want to take a moment really to think about what it means to live alongside the oldest living culture at a time like this. And if you want to share an acknowledgement of your own or tell us where you're from, whose lands you're on today, I'd love to hear that in the chat. All right, so let me see if I can see this. Hi everyone, that's great to see we have someone joining us from India. That's amazing. Hi Emma, hi Gemma, hi Anya, hi Rachel. Great to see those acknowledgements coming through. Thanks everyone for sharing. It's amazing to see so many people joining us from all over Australia and beyond. Wow, Wiradjuri country, amazing. All right, so thank you to the Australia Council for inviting me to connect with you today. It's a real privilege, I have to say, to connect with you at this time, and I haven't taken it lightly. It's actually my first ever webinar, and when Kevin told me that 1,200 people or something crazy had registered, that really got me nervous, particularly since what we're talking about is online audience engagement. I mean, can you believe that? So let's see how we go. Firstly, I need to express some regret for the name of this session. Yes, I chose the name, and yes, and it's an important question for us to pause and consider at a time like this when there is that pressure to kind of get stuff online and be engaging online. But I actually have realised through preparing for this session that what audiences want online, the question isn't always the best way, most creative, inspiring way to think about the kind of challenge and opportunity of audience engagement. And I want to acknowledge a colleague, Michael Edson, for helping me kind of come at this topic in a slightly different way. I think the other thing is that phrasing as such a simple and direct question implies that there's a simple and direct answer, which of course there isn't. So last week when Kevin and Francis and Ian and Laura, we met to talk about this session, I said, can we change the name? And they said, yeah, sure, no problem. But then I thought of how many people have registered to hear me answer this important question. And so as part of my commitment to you, and as a bit of a discipline for myself, I'm sharing this story with you, and I am going to answer that question in about 25 minutes time. So I have one final thing to say before we get into some data, and yes, there will be stats, of course. And in a moment, I would like to run a quick poll to find out a little bit more about you and where you're at in terms of sharing digital work online. But I just want to say basically that the decision to go online, to create work, to be experienced online is not a given. And we don't have time to do justice to all of the kind of complexities of that decision today. But I just want to acknowledge the challenge facing many creators in the sector right now about how to proceed in this kind of quite uncertain time. But basically, for the purposes of developing this session, I've assumed that you are either already on board making work for digital consumption, or you're starting to experiment with online platforms, or you're interested to kind of, I'm curious about how you might potentially serve your community and during this time, basically through the internet. So if, Laura, if we can pop that poll up, that'd be fabulous. If it's not already on your screen, it should be soon. So basically, what I'd love to know is what stage you're at. So are you curious but nothing concrete planned? Are you in the kind of active planning phases or developing something? Have you recently begun sharing work online and are kind of looking at how that's going and how to improve? Are you already established online and kind of in comfortable territory, or even well established and wanting to go to that next level, exploring further opportunities or something else? And please do share it in the chat with us if none of those situations apply to you. If you're here for another reason, we'd love to hear it. So I think before we look at the results, I think the only other thing to say is that whilst there is that sort of expectation and pressure almost to go online, I think, as I've said, it's not a given. And I think if you are taking that decision, it can be a really good thing to reflect on why and what you want to achieve, and really make sure that among colleagues and stakeholders, you're all on the same page about what that intention is. So let's share the results now, if we can. Laura. All right. So interestingly, most people, or the highest proportion of people, 40%, are in that active planning or development stage. We've got around a fifth of people who are curious but nothing concrete planned, or who have recently begun. And then there's about 15% who are established online and wanting to go to that next level. All right. Well, great. Hopefully we'll have something for everyone in this session, but it really helps me to understand where you're at, and hopefully it helps you to know that you're not alone, wherever situation you're in. You're not the only one here today who's on that wavelength. All right, so we're going to talk about three main topics today. The first is reaching an audience online. The second is engagement. What does that look like online today? And impact is the last thing. And yes, I will share some stats. I've already done the poll, but I'm not going to go overboard with fancy charts as I might in other contexts. But because I really want this session to be accessible to everyone, and fancy charts aren't always accessible to everyone. But for those wanting more of a chart fix and stats, I am going to be sharing a fact sheet with you after this session with loads of interesting research, guides, toolkits, examples of online work that I think are really interesting, and some clever people out there doing great work online that you should know about. So let's start with reaching an audience. And I'm going to show you my slides now. Let's see if this works. All right, so it's now possible to reach 4.5 billion people online. I think when we think about an online audience, we think about the number of people out there, don't we? And yes, it's immense. There's actually 3.8 billion of us now on social media. And we know that the world's population is growing, but the level of kind of technology penetration and internet use is growing even faster. So we're seeing more and more people come online literally every day. And the average internet user now spends 6 hours and 43 minutes online every day. So that's more than a quarter of the day, almost half our waking hours, which kind of seems phenomenal. It's doing things like watching TV now online, using social media, streaming music, using games and consoles, you know, things that we don't even kind of think about anymore are actually via the internet. So, I mean, this isn't anything new. We've actually been spending over 6 hours a day for years, 5 years or so. And it's remarkable to think that that time is actually still growing. So in the years up to 2020, that was steadily growing over time. So the next thing I need to say about who's out there is that not everyone enjoys digital inclusion. In fact, about 1 in 10 Australian households don't have access to the internet at home. And although, you know, the proportion of Australians who are online is growing, it has sort of plateaued in recent years. And across the nation, and apologies to anyone who's outside Australia right now to talk about national statistics, but here in Australia, digital inclusion follows some pretty clear economic and social contours. So in general, Australians with low levels of income, low education, and who aren't employed are significantly less digitally included. There's other groups as well in the community who are less likely to be digitally included, like those over 65, living outside metropolitan areas, Indigenous Australians, But the gap is actually widening in some parts of our community, which is kind of a bit sobering. So the unemployed is one of those groups for whom they're not becoming more digitally included over time. They're kind of worse off, which is kind of sobering considering the economic outlook right now, right? So Indigo Holcomb-James, who's a researcher in digital inclusion in our sector, has said that it's important to remember that digital inequity applies to audiences as well as cultural sector practitioners, and that if we want to ensure the culture sector is as inclusive as possible in these times, acknowledging that digital inequity is a critical first step. So I think that's just an important note first up. I think I want to, now what we'll do in the next session is start to talk about those online, but let's not forget who isn't online. So basically, what we're going to do is start to talk about the technology in use today, and basically, click on. The patterns of media consumption have changed quite a lot over the last few decades. I'm showing on screen now a black and white image of a family in the 1960s or so watching, all gathered around watching the telly. Can I hear in the chat just kind of what jumps out to you as kind of the biggest changes, say, in the last decade or two from this photo to what we see in our own households today? I'd love to hear what you read into this photo. So basically, yeah, we're seeing people say watching together, smartphones, yep. Two-screen viewing, absolutely, yep. Bigger TVs, yeah, for some of us. Yeah, broadcast is now really rare, isn't it? Everyone in the same room together. I know, it's funny, isn't it? Choice, yeah, absolutely. So she has a print newspaper. You're right, that's the second screen. It even existed in those days. She is multitasking, reading that paper. Looks like a, not sure what paper it looks like. Yeah, so basically mobile is probably one of the biggest changes, the fact that now today more and more of our time online is actually via our mobiles. And that's been kind of steadily growing over time. So since 2015, 5 years ago, it's gone from about a third to now over half. And although the pandemic is actually seeing us go back to our big screens a bit, so our laptops, our desktops, our TVs, mobile has dropped off a little bit, but it's still the #1 device people are using when they go online these days. So that's kind of interesting to think about when you're thinking about what kind of content to focus on. And it won't surprise you to hear me say that video is king of content now. So 9 in 10 internet users watch video, obviously. It's just that sometimes we don't know exactly how important it is, but Facebook, an analysis of Facebook posts, 700 million posts by far showed that, yes, posts with video on social media are by far and away the most engaging, much more engaging than posts with just an image or a link to other content or just text. So they've also found that video, which is inspirational, funny, or practical, generates the most engagement. So there you go. And yeah, I think in terms of putting video out there, there is obviously always that potential for it to go viral and to reach a huge audience, as we see videos do. But it's worth noting the kind of dark arts or the many layers and factors that go into the virality. And I won't say viral again on this webinar, I apologise. But yeah, lots of things affect how far a video reaches organically. So from the quality of that video content, obviously, and that means different things from technical quality to the content. Choosing a platform, satisfying that platform's algorithms, search engine optimization, all kinds of things. So I'll send around some resources if you're in that space of sharing video and want to optimize. But before we go on to talk more about engagement, I just want to spend a little bit longer talking about media consumption. So since the pandemic began, we've been doing more than we spend certainly more time online in some areas. And I'll just mention, I'm seeing lots of questions in your chat, which is amazing. There's also the Q&A function, I believe, in Zoom, which you can use to share your questions in case, due to the number of comments, we miss anything. So please pop them on there and I'll try and come back to them later. or if we don't get to any today, I'll see what I can do afterwards. But basically, we're watching more news coverage. 67% of us are watching more news coverage. 53% of us are spending more time socializing as a family. 51% are watching more shows on streaming services like Netflix. We're also seeing increases in use of video chat, which won't surprise you. And there's differences in what we're doing online. So for example, video games, which was already set to have basically the biggest year on record ever, have been gaining. So gamers are now gaming more. And new people are taking up those devices and starting to play games. In comparison, sports have really lost out during this time for obvious reasons. So we're going to dive into a bit more around cultural content in a moment, but I want to start, I just want to share with you one kind of, I guess, thing to bear in mind in relation to reaching an audience online, and that's the fact that people behave differently when they go online. So one of the ways that we behave differently is regarding our attention spans. So researchers from Denmark have found in recent years that the global attention span is narrowing over time, and that's due to the amount of information that we're presented with. So, for example, in 2013, a Twitter global trend lasted for over 17 hours, whereas in 2016, just 3 years later, it would last for only about 12 hours. So it shows you the amount of time that collectively we're giving to issues or content, and that's because there's just so much more going on and so much more content that we're presented with. And a recent post-pandemic study by StubHub has looked at this, and they found that Brits have been averaging just 2 minutes 52 seconds before they skip to another song. So we're skipping on quicker to keep things interesting in isolation. And the Danish researchers showed that this trend of our attention span started actually over 100 years ago, but that social media is now amplifying the trend, and they suggest that the distribution of really quality, detailed content or important in-depth stories, distributing them by social media alone may not be the best method alone. So I'll leave you with that. We're going to come back to a concept about that in relation to cultural content in a moment. But I think one thing to say is that, let me just see if I can click on. Basically, the time and place where we encounter content influences how we engage with it. And that's because what we want to achieve when we scroll, you know, Instagram stories while we're sitting on the loo, don't pretend I'm the only one. It's different to what we want to achieve when we kind of collapse on the couch after dinner and turn on Netflix, isn't it? So according to Facebook's product management team, and I'm showing an infographic on screen which just shows basically two modes of participating in video. One is discovery mode with shorter sessions, more frequent, unplanned. People are more looking for information and inspiration, versus intent-based viewing, where people are really planning, having longer sessions, and they're there to be entertained and relaxed potentially. So they think that quick and bite-sized content at one end, often throughout the day, and then deliberate and longer at the other end when there's more time and attention for longer consumption. That's kind of one of the patterns that they're seeing on Facebook. So I think for those who are thinking about content for online, it can be helpful to think about what kind of experience you want the viewer to have. Are you producing content for that discovery mode or intent-based viewing, or both? And thinking about the customer journey in relation to those kind of modes of engagement, particularly with video. I think the other thing to mention in relation to our online behaviours is that the rise of mobile in our lives has led to the rise of multitasking. So Deloitte's Media Consumer Survey found, both in 2019 and this year, I believe, that 90% of respondents multitasked while watching TV in some way. And most commonly, we're using our phones to cruise social media, or our laptops to do social media while we're watching TV. So about 27% of us overall, or 43% of millennials, are doing that. And the social TV movement, which you might have heard about, aims to actually capitalise on this behaviour. And it tries to make watching TV or video, long form content, a more active content experiences for audiences. So You'll recognise that from things like Q&A, or most reality TV shows now have some form of social strategy, which takes content off social media and onto the TV screen and vice versa. And that's to make it, can be used to make it a different experience. It's also been picked up by advertisers, obviously, because researchers from the US have shown that basically when we use social media, when we're watching TV, we are more likely to go online shopping. So there you go. We can be more likely to hand over our wallets in that kind of context. So one last thing in this category of reaching audiences is that online environments can bring out the best and the worst in us human beings. So I want to talk briefly about this thing called online disinhibition. I'm showing a little pie chart, illustrated pie chart on screen now. Yes, I'm a stats nerd. I love pie chart jokes, even though they're not technically correct. But basically, online disinhibition is the lack of restraint that one feels when communicating online in comparison with communicating in person. So possible factors behind this include the fact that we're kind of anonymous online in some forums. We can be invisible to the broadcaster, or there can be asynchronous communication, which is what's happening actually now. So where you can see me talking and hear me talking, but I can't give you that same opportunity because of the number of people involved. So there's other things like personality and cultural background that affect online disinhibition. But what I want to say is that it can be both positive and negative, and it can be positive and negative at the same time for different people. So basically it's positive in that it enables us to open up, form new relationships, tell people what we really think, you know, deepen our connections and express ourselves in different ways, which can be really healthy. It can be a negative where it turns to things like social flaming, trolling, we've all heard of, cyberbullying, social loafing, which you can look up, and other delights that we don't have time to go into today. But I just want to mention it because in your work, in going about producing work for online, these things can happen. And I want to mention them so that you won't be surprised when they happen. You'll know it's just a quirk of human behaviour online. And I think the thing to say is that it's not always, if something appears to be bad to you, there can be a good thing happening for that person who can express themselves or put forward that view in a way. So things can be both good and bad and more than what they seem. So in terms of reaching an audience, yes, the world's population is now at your fingertips, but things are really crowded out there, aren't they? So people are distracted, their attention spans, they're busy, and they're behaving in slightly different ways online to how they might in an offline environment. But I think by being aware of some of the trends in usage, devices, platforms, and context and what might be going on for people, you can choose to strategize a bit more about who you want to reach, how you want to reach, when you want to reach them, what kind of experience and connection you want to have with them. So I'm going to share some words now on the screen. I'm going to share a quote from Peter Tullen, who some of you might know as the co-founder of Remix Summits. You might have attended those events, and Peter's actually running a webinar as a part of this series on Friday, which is all about online business models and monetizing content. So I encourage you to check that out. But he suggests that when thinking about reaching an audience, don't start with the tech or the platform, think about the need. So study the landscape, think deeply about the consumer of the content. And we talk about consumers, audiences, users. I kind of like just people, and think about those human beings and how you want to connect with them. So what customer journey are you creating? And why is it different from what exists today, he says. So we're going to move on now to talk. I see some great things being shared in the chat. Thank you for everyone who's contributing to that conversation. So moving on from reach, let's look at some of the ways that audiences are engaging with cultural content at this time. So streaming, let's talk about streaming. So sizable audiences are tuning into live video to connect at this time. We don't yet know the extent of that. There's not as much data as I would like to have just yet. We will shortly have more information about that. But one survey by StubHub again in the UK showed that 12% have already watched a virtual live performance online and over half are looking to. That gives you a sense of the current participation and the appetite from one study. And we can kind of see the huge popularity of some live streams when we're actually on them. You often can see the visitor count or go to YouTube afterwards and see how many views it's had. And I'd love to hear in the chat what you have personally tuned into during this time, or what you've noticed out there is getting strong engagement. And obviously, when we talk about engagement, we can mean different things. Obviously, the popularity of content, the number of viewers, isn't the only measure of engagement. It's kind of one of the indicators that something might be popular or worth tuning into. There's a lot more we can say about those measures of success. But for now, I just want to mention that, yes, some live streams are getting enormous popularity. So, for instance, Andrea Bocelli's Music for Hope live stream has attracted 36 million views and raised over 250 million euros for the Andrea Bocelli Foundation. Another example from the National Theatre in the UK, which you might have seen recently, and I'll show on screen. Basically, I'm showing a screenshot of a YouTube clip of a play. The play is One Man, Two Governors, and you can see 3 actors on stage performing that production. You can also see the YouTube kind of content around that video. It's showing the number of views, which those with good eyesight will see it somewhere in the 2.5 million views range. So basically, the Clever Clogs over at One Third actually analysed the views during the performance recently, and their analysis found that, and I will show the stats on the next page, forgive me for one chart. So basically, I'm showing a line graph on stage, and what it shows is that 120,000 people or so were actually ready and waiting for that stream when the curtain went up, and the number of viewers peaked. You can see the line start to peak and then plateau at 216,000, and it actually stays pretty well consistent throughout. So one of the things I've been interested in is, you know, are people tuning in and then getting bored and dropped off? Like, what's that? How sticky is that experience? But interesting to see that pretty much almost everyone who's tuned in has stayed for the entire performance. There's a little drop at 8 p.m. where the analysts suggest that the NHS clap was happening at that time, but really interesting to see those stats. I hope that we'll see more stats, and I really would love, if you are aware of analytics, if you yourself have been streaming content and you can share with us any stats, please do in the chat right now, or a link. I'd love to know, particularly, you know, in the small and independent, small to medium and independent sector, what you're seeing in terms of engagement with your online content. I think that the more we can share and be transparent about what we're learning online, the better it will be for all of us in the sector and for our audiences and communities as well. So I want to say next that video content doesn't necessarily need to be live to generate strong engagement, but it certainly helps to have some sense of excitement or urgency for people to tune in. So there's different kind of ways that creators are creating that urgency. One of them is through kind of premiering content on Facebook. So for instance, the Australian Chamber Orchestra recently have been doing that, I believe, with their home casts. And if anyone's watching from the ACO, I'd love to hear what you've been observing. But on the weekend, I noticed that one video had notched up 110,000 views in 4 days, which is pretty amazing. Other broadcasters are doing things like having video online for a limited period. So for instance, on the weekend, a broadcast of the Phantom of the Opera full stage show attracted 8.5 million views, raising funds for NHS charities. And I just saw Adele, you're sharing in the digital concert hall. That's fantastic. So that's an Australian example, really, really well done, raising 82,000 for Australian classical musicians so far. Awesome. Basically, the Phantom of the Opera was only available for 24 hours in the UK and 48 hours, I think, internationally. And I understand part of that was to do with rights. But it's interesting that having that single moment means people don't want to miss it. You know, they're there, they're watching it, they make sure they don't miss out, kind of thing. Whereas video, which is up kind of permanently, doesn't have that same urgency to go and see it, and it just becomes like another thing that's out there. So I think the National Theatre are putting their live streams up for 1 week, and that seems to be a good move. So One Man, Two Governors, the show that we've been talking about, it attracted a further 2 million or more views over the week following the live broadcast. So Bianca, I'd love to hear from you in a moment if you've picked up in the chat any examples or experience that people are sharing about live streaming or engagement with video content.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's been a lot of, hi everyone, by the way, I haven't introduced myself on video yet, but I've been reading all your great recommendations and experiences. Brendan Joyce mentioned that they're teaching violin online, and interestingly, students seem more engaged, wondering if it's because they are looking at a screen. Another one was Maura mentioned an online pub quiz. Joel Evans mentioned live streamed spoken word open mic night via Facebook video, I believe. Andrew Lloyd Webber shows for the screen. There's one every weekend and that's free. So yeah, if you have any other experiences that you've had, please do share in the chat, because and any links if possible, that'd be really interesting for everyone to have a look at as well.
Yeah, and in the coming weeks, if you've got statistics to share, we'd love to start compiling those to share with other colleagues in the sector, so we can try and build up some examples of different types of engagement, particularly moving beyond just views, but looking at, yeah, the quality and how long people stick around, or if they come back, that kind of thing. So what I want to talk about next is another kind of trend during the pandemic, which is related to people showing that they want to make things themselves. So on the next slide, I'm actually showing a screenshot of Instagram, the Between Art and Quarantine hashtag, which I think has been led by the Getty Museum, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's where people have been sharing, recreating images from their collection in their own homes and taking photos of them, and on screen you can see some of the examples where there's famous artwork on one side of the picture, and you know, a content creator who's imitating that work. And if there's any art buffs online who can tell us more about what's going on here, but I kind of, as a researcher, I was thinking, oh, isn't that interesting, those people have, and it's beautiful feed to scroll if you do have time and interest and ability. Basically, I think people are taking quite some care. They're spending a lot of time with that particular work, maybe browsing to find a work that really resonates with them and find out more about the context of it, and then obviously looking at how they can bring that to life in their own way. So it's quite interesting, isn't it? So another way that people are kind of, some other trends I want to tell you about is that search interest in do-it-yourself videos has really spiked in the past few months. And while some of it is about making your own hand sanitizer, there's also a real rise in creative activities. People have also been sharing uploads of like day in the life videos or with me videos. So you might know with me videos is like, you know, do your makeup with me, get ready with me kind of content, but there's more and more creative interpretations of that theme where people are doing draw with me, paint with me, make with me, journal with me, that kind of thing. So it's really interesting. In the pandemic, I think we're seeing more of that everyday creativity. Some people out there have more time, and they are looking at how they can, you know, express themselves and improve their own work in that time. So it's interesting. If you are interested in trends around video content or trying to think up novel ideas, you can head on over to YouTube's Culture and Trends site, where they have been identifying kind of trends in video content. Another example which I'll share with you, which you might have seen, is pub choirs, couch choir, collaborative performances. So I'm showing a screenshot on the slides now of a performance of Close to You, They Long to Be Close to You, that song, where they've had hundreds of people singing the harmonies and then made a video of it afterwards. And I think that's had 640,000 views or something so far. So people want to pass the time and socialise in novel ways. I think that's what we're kind of coming to in this webinar, is the social aspects of engagement. So over on Think with Google, they've looked at search trends since the pandemic began, and they've also identified that as boredom and anxiety has set in, people's search interest in certain terms has changed. So search interest for multiplayer video games has obviously spiked globally, and search interest for virtual happy hour. And then at different times of day, people are interested in different things. So between 11 and 3, people have been searching for relaxation, perhaps because we aren't sleeping as well since the pandemic began. So another way this is coming out, this kind of social thing, is that listening parties and watch parties. So we know already that around 1 in 10 people in England have already held listening parties with their nearest and dearest, and another third of the population or so are planning to do so. So what I want to do is just reflect a bit together on some of these examples. I'd love to know what in the chat, what you see as some of the kind of common themes, some of these examples that have had quite, you know, a lot of popularity or strong engagement statistics in some areas. Like what are those success factors, or what's going on behind some of these examples that you think is leading to this? I'd love to hear some examples there in the chat. So yeah, we need to connect with others, absolutely. Yeah, it's all about connection, isn't it? Focus on community. Yeah, kind of bringing people together, absolutely. Skill sharing and collaboration, absolutely, yes. Finding ways to participate. Yeah, it's kind of interesting, isn't it, that it's not just about watching, is it? There's, yes, watching is the start of it sometimes, but particularly with chat now being a part of a live stream, it's about kind of being seen by others to be watching, isn't it? And being noticed, being recognised, interacting. I think interactivity is obviously, and group experience, yes. Interactivity is so key now, isn't it, to online engagement? And I think we're seeing there's lots of different ways to make that happen. And actually, Christy Dina, in her webinar last week, a couple of weeks ago, when she was talking about digital platforms as part of this series, had some really interesting things to say about interactivity. So if that's a concept you're interested in, I encourage you to check that out if you haven't already. But yeah, the sociability and shareability of experiences online, and the fact that it can be connected to other things. So thinking about it in an ecosystem. Novelty, yes, obviously, is a part of it. All right, so I think kind of what I guess I'm curious here is that there's not one right way, is there? There's not one model. There's not something that you need to copy. There's lots of different possibilities, but I think by looking at examples of what's out there and studying the environment, as Peter Tullen said, we can start to look at what are those principles or ideas, and what sparks for you can be really interesting to think about, or what might work in terms of your creative practice or your work, and what kind of experience do you want to create and leave people with, and what journey do you want them to go on, really. So I'm going to share a quote now from a colleague in Europe, Jasper Vischer, who works on digital transformation with cultural institutions. Oh, apologies, I'm sorry, I'm going flipping here. There's one more quote I need to share before I share Jasper's. Jane Peacock, who's a digital coach in Australia, who coaches people through going online, she says that the opportunity is to be the people that are building the community. So she believes that digital is an enabler of connection. I'm showing her quote on screen. Those that are doing it well, she says, are starting to build collaborative ecosystems around what they do and getting really active and telling their story, reaching out and connecting to people, because that's what she believes we're seeking at this time, is connection. There's one more quote I want to share with you, Jasper's, which I'll show on the next screen. So he believes that successful digital engagement combines reaching out and engaging activities in an ongoing conversation with their audience. So he recommends reaching out to a new audience, address the shared interest, find a shared purpose with a new group of people, and then engage them by telling a unique and compelling story that only you can tell. So that brings us to the final section of the session today, which is what I want to talk about, which is impact from online experiences. And the key point I want to make is that technology is more impactful for audiences when it is social. So research on children's media usage in America shows that children learn more from content when parents or early educators watch and interact with them in that moment, and encourage them to make those real world connections to what they're viewing. And this idea translate to, can translate in lots of different ways among the adult population, I think right now, by thinking about how can interaction and social aspects help make an experience more meaningful for people. So it's not just a one-off, see something in the feed, move on. So the Office of Educational Technology in the USA outlines the types of guidance that can increase active use of more passive technology. And they say that prior to viewing content, suggesting certain elements to watch out for or pay particular attention to can lead to a deeper experience. Viewing the content together with someone else and interacting in that moment. And then after viewing it, engaging in an activity that extends the experience, like reperforming something, connecting the content to the outside world, or building on it or responding to it in some way. So I'd love to hear if you have ideas for what we can do when we're, say, live streaming or sharing a video or sharing a work. What kind of scaffolding can we put in place to help make that a deeper, more impactful, meaningful experience? I'd love to know if you have experience in this area, what you've been trying with your own work, or if you have ideas about what we could do. If you can share that in the chat, I'd love to hear about those examples. Yeah, Emma's saying as a museum educator, she does that kind of thing. Bianca, perhaps you can pick up on some of those ideas in a moment. So what I want to say next is that I think one of the burning questions we're all asking right now is the extent to which a virtual offering can enable artists or cultural institutions to reach people that they wouldn't normally reach, to earn revenue that they might not otherwise be able to, or to deliver more impact through their work. And I want to be both optimistic and realistic at this point. So let's start with the realistic. Basically, ambitious digital projects in our sector, in my experience, can fall short of their targets. So I used to work on a technology innovation program in the UK, the Digital R&D Fund for the Arts, and the evaluators of that program found that among the 52 cultural institutions funded to produce a technology project, that 68% thought that they would be able to reach a bigger audience, but only 33% actually reported that effect. 54% thought that their project would help them reach a more diverse audience, and only 24% reported this as an impact. And 73% thought that their project would help them engage more extensively with their existing audience, and only 33% reported a major positive impact in this area. Now, I'm not sharing this to put a dampener on any efforts at all, but I want to reassure those who might be dabbling and not yet achieve the full potential of what they thought was possible that that's completely normal, okay? So audience development online, audience engagement online, as offline, is really, really hard, and it's new, right? So I think it's really important, particularly when we're embarking on a new idea or something that's new for us, that we set realistic expectations with our collaborators and stakeholders at the outset. And I fully encourage you to start small and iterate from there. So I think that often, we can have really big and ambitious ideas and absolutely go gangbusters for them, but always be ready to look for how you need to pivot. Hate that word right now, but I'm going to use it. And so the principles from the tech world of things like lean startup and failing fast can be really helpful here. So rather than spending, months and limited funds, pouring them all into something that's then going to have a big bang. You might want to try start small, experiment, see what result that you get and go from there. So that said, now for the positive, there has literally never been a better time to reach an audience online, I think, in some ways. So as we talked about already, there are more people online, spending more time online, they're engaging with more online content than ever. And let's face it, we are lonely, bored, isolated, sad, anxious, and potentially, you know, dealing with illness in our lives. So I think basically, you know, it's not just a good time, it's a really important time for creators to be reaching out to people online. And so I think that, yeah, I'm not here to tell you one way or the other. And I said at the beginning, we're not going to go into that decision, but I think there is some exciting potential. And I want to just share one example with you, and that is our early qualitative research in this space is showing that audiences are using this time to sample something new. So we had one person tell us that they have been meaning to see a Bangara performance for years, and that the recent live stream for the Sydney Opera House provided them with that chance to finally see what it was about. So she enjoyed watching it on her smart TV, big screen experience in her living room. She watched the whole thing to the end whilst chatting on WhatsApp with two friends. And she said having the live stream chat turned on made her feel connected. She tried both ways, and she said she liked it with it on because it made her feel more connected. And there was a global audience, I think, of about 3,000 people. And she said it was nice. It felt like a really non-threatening environment. She could fix her own drink during the show. And I asked her, are you more or less likely to buy a ticket to a live show after this experience? And she said, oh, absolutely more likely. And she felt that although the online experience, she felt like it wasn't as good as a live experience, she felt like it was still very enjoyable, and it made her more curious to experience it live in future. So there you go. I'm going to answer the question of the hour right now. What do audiences want online? Right, wish me luck. So audiences, basically online audiences want what offline audiences want, really, and that's what humans want anytime they engage with arts and culture, and that is to fulfill our social, intellectual, emotional and spiritual needs. So right now, as human beings, our wants are kind of simple. A lot of us want to feel safe. We want to connect with other human beings and our shared humanity. We want to be inspired by the work of talented people, of great artists, and to be inspired to create ourselves. And we want to try and process what's happening around us. So most of all, I think when it comes to the arts, what audiences want is for you to show them what's possible. So my colleague Michael Edson's the final person I'm going to quote today. He said that if you want to ask a powerful question that helps your team see what could be possible, that helps you serve the people you serve and love, the question isn't what do people engage with online, it's more what do we stand for? Who do we stand for, and what can we do together? So lastly, I just want to say that basically when I was involved every day in a technology fund, we were waving the flag for digital, and the digital world has really been waiting for this moment when all of you start to think about how you can use this technology for your work to connect with people. So the writer Arundhati Roy has described this time as kind of a portal, and she says that, you know, in the Financial Times article that she wrote, that, you know, the pandemic is like a gateway between one world and the next, and that we can choose to bring our baggage through, or we can leave it behind and be ready to kind of imagine another world. So I invite you to use this time to experiment with digital technology, try different things, connect with different kinds of people, your most loyal followers, the community that you serve, the people who stumble upon you on the internet. And I really encourage you to share your learnings publicly, because I think if we can do that, then collectively, the possibilities are so exciting. I think that we won't just get through these dark days, but emerge into a better, more creative world afterwards. So I will have some resources to share with you after this session. We'll be sending those around in the next couple of days. I've got a fact sheet with some of the sources that I mentioned today, and a video of some of the people who've contributed ideas. You can find that on our website. obviously you can connect with us. We've got a podcast, and the next episode will be coming out soon, all about measuring online engagement and digital metrics with Matt Locke from Story Things, who's amazing. And there's other ways we can connect with you, but thank you to everyone. I'd like to thank you really for tuning in and staying into this point, and I'm really happy to take questions if we have time.
Great. Thank you so much, Tandi. That was just so wonderful and reflective and considered, and I think really helped us all answer that question of what audiences want, or what we think we want online. So thank you. We have run a little bit over time, so apologies for that, but we're still going to hang around and do some quick questions for those of you who are interested in staying. Do you want to flick onto your next slide, Tandi? So we've got your slide up. And I'll just pull up some of the questions. We had 20 questions through that Q&A, which is incredible. I think way more than we've ever received before. So thank you all so much for feeding those through. We're obviously not going to get to them all today, but we'll send them through to Tandi and try and get them answered for you. But so just to come to the first question, which we thought was quite interesting, which is, what is the benefit of a live stream versus pre-recorded content? Do people value the idea of live over potentially higher quality performance in video? What's your thoughts on that, Tandi?
Oh, I'd say try both and see what you find out. I mean, obviously, yes, recorded means you can, there's more possibilities, creative possibilities, production possibilities. Live certainly is exciting, I think. But as we've talked about, there are other ways to get that excitement and urgency through premiering, having it open for a limited time. So I'd encourage you to try both and see what you prefer.
Yeah, totally. Great. We've got another one here from Jackie from Canberra Symphony. Thanks for sending this through, Jackie. So she says she'd love to hear Tandi's insights on creating online content to engage both a core base of patrons age 65 plus at the same time as an audience development with a much younger audience. You got some ideas there?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I'd say reaching a new audience is going to be harder right now, but I think it's great that you've identified those two different goals. And you might have, it could be hard to achieve multiple things with one thing, but you could start with your audience and see what comes of it. So obviously, if you've got a database or a social network that you can start with, that really gives you something to work from. So I think building an online audience from scratch, a new one, is going to be a more difficult exercise. So I'd say be experimenting in that space, but definitely don't forget about your loyal audience. So I'd be thinking about how you allocate resources between those two things. I'm thinking creatively about how you might meet both of those markets. I think there's some exciting intergenerational kind of possibilities there. So love to hear what you come up with. Do share. But I'd say it might be hard to do both at once. And certainly looking after your existing loyal follower base might be a good priority to start with.
Great. And I think we'll probably just fit in maybe one more, even though there's been so many, there's still more coming through, but we'll follow up with you guys after. But there's been a great one that's come in saying, during COVID-19, and this sort of responds to quite a few people actually. So during COVID-19, we've seen an enormous output of free arts content. Whilst this is wonderful and the audience point of view, and from an audience point of view, is this another case of artists being their own worst enemy, in that many artists are not or cannot earn anything from streaming for free? Are we training our audiences to expect quality content for free, which is, of course, how the newspaper industry came to its knees? And I think this actually feeds on really nicely to Friday's session.
Yeah, I'd love to hear what Peter will have to say about this. I'd say you'd be crazy not to have some mechanism for donations if you are live streaming. I think that's something that people are certainly playing with right now, and you might want to look up the results of the National Theatre's donation campaign, which showed that they haven't anywhere near what they would at the box office for a normal production, but it's not to be sneezed at either. So I think certainly some people are in the mind to give. I hope we'll have some more stats to share with you around giving in the coming weeks. We're going to be doing some research in that space. But I'd say, certainly don't shut off any potential donations, experience, or pay what you want kind of things. Yeah, I mean, obviously there's lots of things that will go into your decision about how much time and effort you can put into these experiences for people right now. So I'll have a bit more of a think about what I might tell you on that topic, and let's tune in to see what Peter will say on Friday about that too.
Great. On that note, I think that's probably just about all we'll have time for questions-wise today. But,
I'm more than happy to.
Didn't get to your question, but if it's still burning, of course, please feel free to send it through to us at leadershipprogram@australiacouncil.gov.au, and we'll pass it on to Tandi for you. Tandi, is there anything else you wanted to cover before we wrap up with the last few slides?
No, I just want to again acknowledge those who contributed content for this session. Thank you. And just to everyone who's asked a question, I will try and get to those in some format in the next little while. So I really appreciate your interest, and I hope I can help.
Great. Sorry, I've just somehow flicked back to right at the beginning of my slides. So we just wanted to, just before we wrap up, just remind everyone again that this Friday at 11 a.m, we'll be hosting Peter Tullen's Remix from Remix session on business models and monetizing digital work online. So please do join us for that. I'm sure it's something that's definitely front of mind for a lot of people at the moment. Also at 2 p.m. on Friday is our First Nations Roundtable on advocating arts. So that will also be an excellent session with guest panelists Jim Blah, Janina Harding and Nadi Simpson. We encourage you to check out both of those sessions if you're available. The roundtables are open to all. And finally, just a quick reminder that the Australia Council's Resilience Fund is the fund includes 3 streams focusing on immediate support for survival, adaptation and creation. We encourage you to check out our website or contact our inquiries team if you have any further questions. But lastly, I just want to say thank you again to Tandi and Bianca. It's been such an incredible session. And thank you, I just extend my thank you again to all of you for your strength, your ambition, your creativity, and just ongoing working together with us to figure this all out. So we hope to see you next time, and thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.